I had expressly told all family and friends, do not take any pictures. In what world would I ever want to remember this? Well, my father-in-law didn't get the memo. And he took advantage of a guy who was doped up on Dilaudid, okay, which I highly recommend. Morphine, not so much. Morphine, all it does for me, doesn't help my pain at all, but it makes me incredibly paranoid. Yeah, so I'm told, I don't remember doing this, but I'm told that while I was there getting morphine, that I would lean over to my wife and point at the nurses and say, you see her over there? She is not who she says she is. Sounds familiar? Were you my nurse? No. I was told that between the damage to my neck and the damage to my wrist, which, by the way, had compressed my ulnar nerve, they did not know how long since the accident this had been the case, but my hand was in a claw. You guys have heard, some of you may have heard of this with ulnar nerve damage. You get the claw. And I could not extend these two fingers to save my life. And they were afraid that the amount of time that I had compression there was going to result in permanent damage there. Between that and my neck, they said, you will never work again. Forget being a paramedic. You won't even be able to work as a telemarketer. Okay? And that's basically the news I'm getting here. And on top of that, the surgeon before the neck surgery comes in and says, I need to let you know this is extremely serious. There is a very, very real chance that you're going to come out of that OR paralyzed just from the surgery itself. And then being told that I would never work again, that was my turn to lose control. I am not too big a man to admit to you that I did begin sobbing uncontrollably while my wife tried to console me. You see, I remember looking at Jamie, my beautiful wife of only 2 years, pregnant with our unborn son. And I looked at her and I said, I am so sorry. I said that, forgive me, I said that multiple times. I blamed myself. I said all I wanted to do was be a good husband and father and take care of you. You see, I knew very early on in our relationship that Jamie, her dream was to be a stay-at-home mom, taking care of the kids, and I was committed to being the sole provider of our family. Even if we weren't living on much, I was going to make it work. But now, her dream is never coming true because of me. Not only would she have to be the sole provider of our family and try to be a good mother at the same time, but on top of that, she would have to care for a husband who would be completely dependent upon her, needing her help in order to get dressed, to bathe, maybe even to eat or use the bathroom. This was the situation we were looking at. And, you know, they say, for better or worse, till death do us part. But I got to tell you, when you've only been married to someone for 2 years, someone as wonderful as my wife is, that vow didn't mean jack to me. All I thought was, this is not what she signed up for. She's only been married to me for 2 years, and now I'm going to ruin her life. It was in that moment when I first began to wish that I died. And that was the beginning of a very long, hard battle with depression. In any case, went through the surgery, anterior and posterior fusion. I have brackets, lots of metal and screws there, and I have a donor bone, a piece of someone's, I believe it's a tibia, in my neck. And matter of fact, if you look closely, right over here, there's the donor bone. So I survived the surgery, and thank God, obviously, I came out of it without being paralyzed. I was home again less than a week later. Folks in the pre-hospital arena, let me ask you something. Back in 2007, in a motor vehicle accident, who got a backboard? Everyone. Now today, having been through this experience, I was on a backboard for 2 days. But having been through this, when all the changes started coming out, what happened to the backboard? There is no backboard anymore. Essentially, we use it at SCAD to pick somebody up off the ground, lay them on the stretcher, and then the backboard goes in the back of the cabinet. So when all of these changes started coming out, coming from my perspective, I was extremely skeptical, and I had kind of a prove it position on this whole thing. And when I was first told about, we're doing away with the backboard, first thing I said was, whoa, why? Oh, because you have to backboard so many people before you do any of them any good. So, I was the one in a million, okay? So what? And then they said, oh, but you're causing unnecessary harm to these other patients. What harm? And you know what? Initially, all I was told was, it increases pain. And it increases the chances of bed sores. How long are you leaving them on the frickin' board? And so what? It's still better than ending up paralyzed from the neck down. You see where my mind was at this point? So I was definitely not a fan of any of these changes when they came out. In the early 2000s, we backboarded approximately 5 million patients a year in this country. Most of them had absolutely no back or neck complaints whatsoever. But I went and started doing my own research because I knew there's got to be a hole in here. And here's what I learned. In 1998, there was a study that far back that said that the chances of actually having even a slight chance of helping somebody through immobilization is less than 2%. I said, okay, that's still not zero. Then I found a study that said, let me know if this shocks you. Did you know there are no studies that have ever been conducted, any scientific studies, to prove that the backboard does any good at all? Not one. We used it because it just kind of seemed to make sense. Hey, you break your leg, you splint it. You break your arm, you splint it. You break your back and your neck, you splint it. But nobody asked the question, is this doing any good? So still I'm looking at it, I'm going, okay, so all you've told me is that it doesn't do very many people very much good, but you've not told me that it does any significant harm. Well, tons of research started popping up saying that it does a lot more harm than good. In fact, one study in 2010 said you'd have to immobilize 1,032 patients before potentially benefiting one. Potentially. On the other hand, you only have to backboard 66 to potentially kill one. Yes, I said kill. I know you're thinking, how in the world the board kills somebody? We do contribute to a lot of deaths by the use of the backboard, and we had no idea. We'll talk about that in a moment. So, what do you guys think? What are some problems that could be created by being immobilized to a backboard. From what you've seen, what you think, let me hear your thoughts. Okay, airway, aspiration, difficulty breathing, I heard all that. What else? Sorry, there were a lot of answers there. Yeah, no, you guys are all over it. Yes, they did a study where they took completely healthy people and put them on backboards, securing them textbook style, and there was a reduction in their respiratory efficiency of 15 to 20%, perfectly healthy. And then, of course, there's the risk of aspiration. What did we do when a patient on a backboard started to upchuck? Kind of defeated the purpose of trying not to manipulate their spine. And they did study and said, no matter how well you do the boarding, you're not going to keep from manipulating the spine by doing that. So, okay, that's obviously not good. Anybody think of anything else? Besides pressure ulcers, seriously. What? Yes. The backboard does not fit the contours of your body. Especially, your elderly folks with kyphosis, lordosis, and such. Yeah, that's definitely an issue. And here's where the argument about pain really started to make more sense to me. If a patient's brought in on a backboard and didn't have any back or neck pain, but now they do, and the doctor says, "Are you experiencing neck or back pain?" They say, "Yes." Doctor cannot rule out the possibility of spinal injury. So off to radiology they go, exposed to unnecessary radiation. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. How serious can that risk of radiation causing cancer really be? Well, I looked into it, and I'm not going to get into all the details, but it is not zero. It is a substantial risk, and the more that you have, the greater risk you're at, because it is a cumulative effect. So, but I think the number one reason why backboards can be detrimental is because they delay transport to the operating room, where they're going to get the life-saving treatment they really need. And they found that even that delay of 10 to 15 minutes can, in fact, mean the difference between life and death for someone who's got a lacerated liver or collapsed lung. Okay? Because then we're just packaging up a very pretty-looking corpse when we backboard. So the spinal clearance protocols, you guys remember these coming out? Now we got smart. We're going to not use the backboard so much. We're just going to test some neurological things on the patients and rule out the need for putting them on a board. Did you know that these spinal clearance protocols started coming out as early as 1990? I didn't know that. I thought it was a brand new thing. They've been using it at a hospital for years. The spinal clearance protocols came about because of what's called the Nexus study, which had the goal of trying to reduce the number of people being exposed to unnecessary radiation. So they put this protocol, the Nexus protocol, to the test, and they had 34,000 patients who had been sent to radiography because they had some sort of traumatic injury. Of those, 818 had C-spine fractures. Now, here comes the big question, the Nexus, those questions that we were asking to clear the spine. How did it perform compared to radiology? The protocol, out of 818 fractures, identified 810, missed 8, which is a failure rate of less than 1%. But that's not all. Out of that 8, only 1 needed surgery. And even then, it's debatable whether or not a backboard would have done him any good. So this stuff actually worked. And back in the day, we said, hey, you got shot in the torso, we got to backboard you. Why? We don't know where that bullet went. It could have ricocheted off of this rib and down off your pelvis and then went up and hit all 87 of your vertebrae. We don't know where it went. So nobody actually stopped and bothered to say, oh, maybe we should see if this is actually true. But finally someone did. They looked at people with penetrating trauma to the neck and torso, gunshots, to see just how many of them would have any kind of spinal damage requiring surgery. Here's the reality. Out of 44 patients with penetrating trauma to the torso or neck, less than 0.03% required spinal surgery. However, that same 44 people, 41% needed emergency intubation and 55% needed emergency surgery for what? To solve and fix problems caused by the gunshot wound. Because there's other stuff in here, and you need that stuff to work. Look at this. Relatively new science. Blow your mind. We could be hurting people with a C-collar now. Yeah, absolutely. It's what the new research is saying. Now, I want to preface this by saying this is new research, so take it with a grain of salt. But there's this one study in particular that really puts things into perspective here. What they did was they took 9 fresh cadavers. Yes, that's right. Fresh and cadaver were in the same sentence. So they took these cadavers and they surgically severed the connections between 2 vertebrae, simulating a very severe spinal injury. And then they applied the C-collar exactly according to the textbook and manufacturer's instructions. Guess what happened? Yes, distraction pulled vertebrae apart by as much as 11 millimeters. But every single one had pathological distraction. Every single one. Maybe not 11, but enough to be pathological. So I say that only to say don't be flippant about using the C-collar. But getting back to the story here, and I'm going to try to wrap this up really quick because we're about out of time. People knew me in that small town as a Bible-believing Christian, and I had a number of people come up to me and say, why would a good God allow something like this to happen to you? And I asked myself that question a whole lot. What did I do wrong? I'm being punished for something. I was convinced. But then I began to ask a better question. You guys saw the statistics up here? Would you all agree I should not be alive? That was the question I started asking. Why would God protect me and not only protect my life, but restore my ability to work and provide for my family as I'd originally planned? I don't know the answer to that question, honestly, but I like to think that at least part of the reason is this. This is why I think I'm still here. How long do you think it was from the time of the accident to the time I returned to work? Any guesses? 2 years? 3 years? 6 months. 6 months, and I was back on the ambulance, this time as a paramedic. I do not neglect the fact that I'm one of the fortunate. A lot of people who don't have as happy an ending as mine. But I hope that that you've learned something through this, maybe a perspective through the eyes of a future patient one day, realizing that to them, it's not just another call. It's not just another patient. It's their life. It's everything. Thank you.